want to start with a story when I was a little boy. I'd like to say I was about 8 years old, 9 years old, somewhere in there. And we had a barn. And in our barn, we had a loft. And so you had the downstairs part of the barn where the animals stayed. You had your pens down there, and we kept chickens down there, and we had cages where we could keep goats in there, pigs in there, whatever animal you might want to think about during that time. So we had those kinds of animals in our barn in the downstairs. Now the upstairs of the barn was just hay. We used it just for storage for hay to feed the animals. Because the kind of animals we kept were animals that ate grass. And then when the winter came and the snow came and the ice came, the grass kind of disappeared. And so you needed food to feed your animals all winter long. So our downstairs was animals, our upstairs was hay. I was 8 or 9 years old, and my brother, 4 years older than me, I'd like to say he was 12, 13, somewhere in there. He had one of his good friends over, and they were playing. And I really wanted to play with them. I wanted them to accept me. I wanted them to let me play with them. And they were in the upstairs of the barn loft, and they had tried to get away from me 2 or 3 or 4 different times. And you can imagine a Parker one boy trying to play with some Parker 2 boys and just following around and being a pest, I'm sure was probably a part of that concept. They finally went to the barn loft, and I climbed up the barn loft, and I'm climbing up the ladder to go up to the top, just still trying to just be with them, still just trying to be with my big brother and be friends with him and hang out with him and whatever that was. I don't think it ever had anything to do with status. But we're just on a farm, only animals around. They didn't necessarily give me any street cred, but I think it was the idea of being accepted from that older brother kind of idea. And as I'm climbing up the ladder, I get to the very top, and I put my hand on what's basically the floor of the loft. Then I put my other hand, and then you pull yourself up kind of idea. And I put my hands on both sides, and my brother slammed the door down, which was like a hatch, and came down on my fingers, and I fell out of the loft. And it was, at that time, it was about a 45-foot fall, but looking back now, it was probably 7 or 8 feet fall, and I'm laying down, and I don't think my body was hurt at all, but I know my heart was hurt. I just couldn't understand that idea. And then a little while, they ran by me, and they ran up the hill to where our house was, and I ran after them. And at this point, I'm not hurt as much as I'm mad, and maybe it's my hurt's coming out in anger, right? And I run up to the driveway, and I'm right behind them, and they turn and start throwing rocks at me. Not maliciously, I don't believe for a moment, more just the leave us alone kind of thing. And they ran behind. At the same time, my dad was trying to give my mom a present. And we were a family that just, we never went hungry, but we never had money. We just didn't have money. And my dad, as a present to my mom, my dad was a carpenter. He was building an addition onto our house, and a new hallway with storage cabinets and a new bathroom, all down there on the first floor. It was beautiful, the work that he was going to do in a laundry room there at the end. He was doing this, and then a deck on the outside, and this was my dad's present to my mom. And I can't even grasp now what that cost him, because I know we didn't have money, and the sacrifices I'm sure he made to make that happen. Looking back with what wisdom I have now, and the fact that I had so little, or maybe none at that time. But my brother and his friend ran behind the bathtub insert. And it was one of those bathtub shower things. So it was a full bathtub, and it had the back wall on it and the 2 side walls on it. And it's the kind you put in your bathroom, and now you have both a bathtub and a shower. It was one of those tub shower kind of combos. And my brother and his friend ran behind it. And I just pick up rocks and start throwing. And I'm just throwing rocks at them, but all I'm really doing is just hitting Dad's brand new bathtub shower combination thing that he's got for my mom as a present for her for their anniversary. rocks. About that time, my dad comes out of the house. I got paddled twice in my life. And that was one day that I got paddled. And I deserved it. Both days were my brother's fault. Let's not go there. You can read that in my memoir someday when I write it all out. I'm in a counseling session. They were all both times brother's fault. But my dad came out and he was so angry. And I think it was more than angry. He was so hurt. He was so disappointed. But not just because of how dumb my brother and I would be, but because my actions, and probably to a lesser degree my brother's actions, had damaged that present that he was giving my mom. And you can walk into my mom's house still today and shower in that bathroom, and those marks are still there. Dad took them and puttied them up and sanded them down. You still see them. You still can see. Probably the good news is I didn't throw harder and I wasn't a better aim. Maybe that's the positive we can take from this, because there's not nearly as many marks as there probably should have been. But there's a particularly really ugly one, kind of right in the middle. It's about 4 inches wide. It's real ugly and reminded of that. And my dad paddled me, like I said that day. I think my dad and I were so close. I think him paddling me was nothing compared to the fact that he kind of went the rest of the day and didn't talk to me. And the older I get, the more insight I have into my dad, because I get that same insight into me. He knew that he couldn't control the words coming out of his mouth. He was too angry. It was too personal. It was too fresh. And he knew that if he said what he was really thinking to me, he knew it would tear me up. Because I was so tender. I had the same deja vu moments with my 2 boys because of their tender hearts. They're knuckleheads. They're the best kids you'd ever meet. They have those tender hearts. And I watch my words with them because I know how easily my words come out. Could hurt them. And so I end up being quiet because I know when I'm quiet that I don't have to try to put words back in my mouth that I know I can't do that. And so a couple days later, Dad and I sat down and had a really good talk. And he said, Josh, he said, what you did, he said, I've been trying the last few days just to make sure I don't overreact to this. He said, but I want you to know that you're forgiven. And I'm telling you, I would let him pound me 20 more times if he would just look at me again and say, you're forgiven. No, those words meant more to me than anything. For my sin, for my stupidity, there was forgiveness, which is beautiful. But there was still consequences, right? That's kind of what we talked about in middle school Bible this past week. David was forgiven, but there were still consequences for his actions, right? Solomon messed up at the end of his ministry. He was forgiven, but there were still consequences. And we talk about all these different things. And forgiveness is there, but there are consequences to sin. My assigned topic today is Thanksgiving. And I can pull out right now the 10 lepers and give you a sermon on the 10 lepers, and Thanksgiving is just like that. But that's like putting the ball on the tee. I'm not going to go that route, because that's just way too easy of a route to get to Thanksgiving. So I'm going to go a much more difficult route today. Because as I have been thinking and praying, I spent hours last night just thinking and praying over this and writing sermon after sermon and pulling that out, and I kept ending up at the same place. And I firmly believe it's where God wants us to be. So we're going to jump into the idea this morning. Instead of Thanksgiving, we'll jump into the idea of forgiveness. And hopefully bring that full circle and bring it back to Thanksgiving. Okay? Now can you go ahead and put up scripture for us this morning, guys? Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? Now, this is a strange question to you and I. We sit here and think, well, where did Peter get this from? Where did this 7 times come from kind of idea? What was common for the rabbis to teach during the time of Jesus, they extrapolated a passage from the book of Amos, where God is saying 3 times is enough and 4 times is too much. And what they took that passage to mean is that God would forgive any single one of us for a sin 3 times, but he wouldn't forgive us for the same sin the 4th time. And so they took this passage of Amos, and that was a common teaching during this time by the rabbis. And so you're sitting there thinking, well, where did Jesus, or where did Peter get this idea of 7 times? Well, through the teaching of Jesus already, he has to know that forgiveness is a big deal to Jesus. He has to know that forgiveness is really important. And so what he did was he took that number 3, thinking, hey, if God will forgive us 3 times for the same sin, let me double it and let me just add 1 for a 1. And I have no doubt as he asked this question, he asked this question for trying to get praise. He expected God and Jesus just to look at him and say, wow, Peter, 7 times, wow, that's amazing. That's incredible how much mercy there is in that idea. And I have no doubt that he was trying to impress Jesus by how merciful he was and by how merciful his question made him look. And then Jesus does what Jesus always does. He just kind of blows you out of the water. And he sometimes does it by turning and asking you a question. Sometimes he does it by telling you a story. But either way, Jesus turns this and kind of just blows him out of the water. Because I have no doubt that Peter said this wanting praise. Said this thinking that he was going to impress Jesus. And he simply wasn't. Because Jesus did what he always did. He raised the bar. We looked at that beautiful passage in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And we talked about how Jesus just continually raised the bar. You know, hey, you heard not to murder, right? That's Old Testament, that's 10 Commandments, don't murder, right? And then Jesus raised the bar and says, hey, I tell you, not only don't murder, don't hate. Don't hate people with your, don't get angry at people, right? And he raises that bar and he says, hey, you heard, don't commit adultery, right? That's a pretty easy one. I'm almost 20 years in, I've not committed adultery by all those definitions. Then he raises that bar up as he says, hey, not only don't commit adultery, don't look at a person lustfully. And all of a sudden, it went from a bar that was real low that most of us felt like, hey, I'm pretty good on that. And then he just kind of raised that bar up. And he got us to the idea that we never seemed to get there before. He got us to the idea that God's not so worried about what he sees on the outside. That God worries about our heart, about our thoughts, in addition to our words and our actions. That God looks at the inner part of us, right? You remember when Samuel was to pick the next king, right? And David's brothers all came out, right? And all the sons of Jesse are coming out. And the first one that comes out is Eliab, E-L-I-A-B, Eliab. And Eliab was tall, and he was handsome, and he looked like a warrior. He looked like the kind of guy you would pick as your king, right? He's the kind of guy that if he was on the football team, he would have been the quarterback and the captain, right? He had that look. And Samuel's like, oh, I see him now. God, you don't need to tell me who it is. I see him with my own eyes. And God says, don't look at the outward appearance. I'm not worried about the outward. Why does someone's outward appearance impress God? Didn't he make you? Oh, I'm going to impress God with how tall I am. God made you how tall you are. Oh, I will really impress God with my smile. Who do you think gave you your teeth? How silly, right? And we sit there, and that old idea is that we're going to impress God with what we have on the outside. And God says, no, let's take it the next step. Jesus says, let's take it the next step. Let's not just worry about the outside. Let's worry about who we really are. Because you and I both know that we can put up this facade. We can put up this fake appearance. You and I and all people have the ability to be incredible hypocrites. In other words, we show people only what we want them to see. Do you know the word hypocrite is a dramatic term? It comes from the theater. It comes from the realm of acting. And its root is the idea of putting a mask on. And so it's an old term that everybody had the understanding of. When you do it, you're pretending to be something you're not. You're putting a mask on to cover who you really are and show people something that's different, right? And you and I have that ability. I can choose what part of you I show me. Now, it gets harder at Mountain Mission School. We all know that. It's much harder at Mountain Mission School because we're together for such a length of time. A teacher in the public school setting, they can fool you for a few hours a day, and you don't ever really know who they are, maybe because you only see them in this one house. At Mountain Mission School, we're together enough that you see each other, and not just in our best times, you see each other in our worst times. Not just the happy times, but the sad times and the tough times too. And so it's harder to kind of put on that facade here, right? But Jesus continually pointed out the idea of, I'm not so worried about what you're looking like on the outside here. I want you to be right on the inside. I want your heart to be right. I want you to get your mind right. I want you to be right on the inside.